I'm Matt Courtwright.
And I'm Levon Dunn.
Kevin Flynn.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
love your humbleness.
Yeah.
So Kevin and I just met yesterday. We don't really even know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. The untold story of Pacific Northwest Rugby. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. You know, I mean, in the 60s, rugby was here, you know, and so I'm the president of Seattle Rugby Club, right? It's been around since 66. You know, when all these years later, when we're talking about pro rugby, I mean, you know, Beach and Seattle combined, and really our dream was that we were going to get to where we are now, you know, and that was getting guys together that, you know, were struggling in their own rugby environments, and then we got together and it built from there and we really worked to get to where we're at today. And I mean, you know, Seattle Rugby Club's logo is obviously, you know, an orca, you know, and Seawall's is an orca. That's not a coincidence, right? So, but you know, there's a lot of other clubs in the Northwest. You know, Chuckanut, Tacoma, Eastside Valley, Mud Hens, men, women, wheelchair rugby, you know, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there's a rich history here, and by bringing the Seawalls, you know, creating the Seawalls here in the Northwest, which I was lucky to be, you know, one of 3 guys that helped create that, was really a cherry on the cake. You know, I mean, but it's not what it was all about, right? You know, because at the end of the day, rugby's for everybody.
Yes.
Right? And we're proud about saying that. As rugby players and rugby people, we say it all the time. But then you start to realise, when I retired from playing competitively, I started to realise, wow, people don't actually know the real benefits of rugby.
Yes,
right?
Which is more than just a game and more than just a meal after the game.
Oh.
There's so much more to the depth.
I never once in my life questioned whether I would have a job, a place to live, the opportunity to travel, more friends, and that didn't matter what level of rugby I played. And then when I stopped playing, I started to realise, you know, you ask yourself, right, where am I going next in my rugby career? Because your rugby career doesn't end, right? Your playing career ends,
right?
But your rugby career doesn't end, you know. And then you start thinking about, well, all the jobs I found, the people I found, the fun I had, you know, the girlfriends I met, the wife I married, right? You know, so
yes.
All of a sudden these things are, you know, you start to not take it for granted. You know, and then you start talking to the players that you played with all these years, and some guys have come from real bad situations, ex-gang members, you know, people who have been with PTSD, military guys who we work with on a daily basis, you know, who need help and need that camaraderie and all that. And all of a sudden you start telling that story to the people on the outside, and they're unaware of it. You know, they thought it was just about playing rugby for 8 minutes on Saturday afternoon. And that's actually the smallest part of it.
It's the cherry on top.
It's just the cherry of it. Yeah.
So when it comes to like culture in the United States, and it comes to what we were talking about before we came on, the importance of support and community and everything like that. How can we build that? I mean, just by community, but also like in North America or United States. How do we I guess communicate or convey those values of rugby?
I think, yeah, you set the examples. You get engaged, right? I mean, if you're running a company, there's a lot of people who own their own businesses and that. And how many companies go, we want to be involved in a community program? Well, why is that? Because then your employees want to work for that company and they want to stay there. It's no different with a rugby program, you know. And when I was lucky to be passionate, and I was blessed to be part of some people's lives where if it wasn't for our involvement, they would have taken their own lives. You know, so once you've experienced that, all of a sudden this goes in a whole different direction. And, you know, we are surrounded by things that we can be involved in on a daily basis, right? So, you know, how do we engage our community? There's special needs events we can go to. We can unload wheelchairs for the wheelchair rugby team, right? We can go down and, you know, help at schools and engage and take our athletes that have come from bad situations. We've got mentorship programs at Thomas Jefferson High School. We've gone down to Rainier Beach with athletes that have come from those neighborhoods, right? And all of a sudden, you know, it's not hard because these things are all around us. We just have to be part of it.
Boys and Girls Club for how many years in Federal Way now?
Oh,
I mean, oodles.
Yeah.
I mean, since 18,
yeah.
if I remember right.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, when you're giving back to your community, the people that give back to you the most is your own players. to your question, you start looking at the best programs in the world. Saracens in London, and Seattle Rugby Club is affiliated with Saracens. We'd sit there and I'd talk to the CEO at the time, and we'd have an hour and a half conversation, and none of it would be about rugby. It would be about how they volunteer their time for autistic children. But all of a sudden, the players didn't want to go anywhere. They wanted to be part of that program.
Yeah.
Saracens went down a division. The players got their wages cut by 40%. Did they leave? No. Right? Imagine having a business that did that. You could cut someone's wages by 40% and they still want to stay and work for you. What does that say about your culture within your program, right? So, so Northern Hemisphere, so many people want to be a Saracen, and Southern Hemisphere, everyone wants to be a Crusader.
True.
Right? Why is that? We talked about the All Blacks in the kitchen. It's like, when we talk about the All Blacks, it's like a spiritual thing. It's like...
Yeah, it's so much more than a game again.
It's so much more than a game. So, if you can instill that within your program, and the reality is, it's not hard, because we're surrounded. Your players are from the people that need help, right? We'd do a luau, right? I realised we were talking in the kitchen about social events, right? We went through Black Lives Matter, and it made you question so many things, right? And we have such a diverse group, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, just a minute, why is some of our guys, people of colour, not coming to the bars, or some of the Polynesian guys? And well, all these years we went, well, we have drink ups at the Irish pub. Well, just a minute, a lot of them don't drink. And we're just expecting those guys. That's not fair. So then we're like, well, look, we need to experience each other's cultures, So then the club would put on a luau, we'd raise the money, and the players, everyone would engage in it. The Fijian, Tongan, Samoan groups would put on dances, and we'd do touch rugby that day. All of a sudden, we're all engaged in each other's cultures, and these things are already happening. It's not like it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to acknowledge it. And being part of it. There's things all the time where we can get our players to show up and be part of it. And initially they're like, they're young men, young women, and they're like, But I can tell you now, guys that I know have been to special needs events have come away and gone, wow, And luckily, this isn't just Seattle Rugby Club. We're trying to engage Rugby Washington, which is the youth union, and Panafu, which is the adult union, and them to share all the opportunities for us to engage our community. Because guess what? We can't stand on a chair and just shout rugby louder and expect to fill a stadium.
Yeah.
We have to be engaged in what other people are passionate about. We've got a lot of military connections. There's 100,000 people affiliated in Fort Lewis. That's it's 30 minutes away from the stadium. Right? How do we connect with veterans? How do we connect with people who serve, their families that are looking to do things? And we have multiple veterans in the program that we support, and we've given them the opportunity to support veterans as well. And all of a sudden, now we're seeing people who are non-rugby people coming to games. A funny story was we went to year one. We went and played Glendale, and my mate was the manager for Glendale. I went to college with him, and I said to him, why don't you give Denver Harlequins wheelchair team? Why don't you give them 30 tickets for the game? And I'd already given him my tickets. He didn't know that. Right. And anyway, I knew he's not a bad person. I knew he'd just be, great idea. Just carry on,
Mm-hmm.
Well, sure enough, we sat down. He's in the booth right there, and I'm in the booth here, and all the wheelchair guys start coming in. It's all they came anyway, And I went, no. That's what I was trying to explain to him. That was a phone call. That's all that was a phone call. And now guess what? We know people will love rugby, but we've got to get them in the door first.
Yeah, we got to let them fall in love with the collision.
Yeah. And also, and the sport itself, but also which non-rugby people experience is like, well, you're not expecting to sit in a crowd, such a diverse group, and everyone's having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can ask those questions that you think are lame, and people are like, "Oh no, let me," you'll hear somebody like, "I never met this person. I just saw him like 2 minutes ago," and they're explaining the game to me with a smile on their face, and like, wow. You don't get that anywhere else.
Yeah. Exactly. That's some of the things, when we're sitting in the stands together, him and I have seats right next to each other.
Yeah. That's how our
Starfight.
Friendship kicked off.
That's right. Yeah.
In all sincerity. And then we realized, dude, our parents live by each other.
we
literally 100 miles away.
Yeah.
And we're like, and we start sharing, I'm like, WTF, man. Our parents know each other. Now we know each other. this is pretty cool. We probably crossed paths a hundred times.
We had met like in Pacific Beach out.
Well, you're biased right into rugby. I mean, rugby's the same, right? It's a small world.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an underestimation right there.
Exactly.
And that's which is fantastic.
Like minds, right?
You're saying there's 6 degrees of separation. I mean, Seattle or Washington. I mean, and then rugby on top of it, it's like 3. You know what I mean? You're going to find people. So, and look, I think for each program, it's finding something that brings people together. You know, it's great to see such more. Back in the day when I first come here, there was a Tongan team, a Samoan team, a Fijian team, and then I was at Rugby Club, and we had a couple of Fijians and an African American. But now it's changed, which is fantastic. You know, there's more diversity, but with those cultures and difference in cultures, how can we collectively bring them together to go for the same thing? You know, for Seattle Rugby Club, it was TSPDS, right? You know, which stands for the shit people don't see.
I know that.
Now, when we're with kids, that's the stuff people don't see, right? When we're kids,
right? Yeah.
but ultimately, what did that do? When the Seawalls arrived, and it was making sure people did things for the right reasons. You're working hard when people aren't working hard. You're engaged in your community, not just because the lights are on and it's game time. It's what people don't see makes you, not just as a rugby player, as a person. And now there's guys, you talk about that culture, that's 5 years old. Now there's guys with that tattooed on them, right? Yeah, and one of our players, Brandon, who played for the Seawalls against San Diego, 3 of the guys have not played for the Seawalls before. Brandon went down there, and on his wrist was TSPDS. And I was crying in the changing room when we're getting ready. I'm like, he's brought that to a professional rugby game, and that guy started playing rugby in October.
Wow.
Yes. Wow. I played in the first rugby game you ever played in with him. I went down there to coach him, and I ended up being on the field, which was stupid.
You're not as young and spry as you once were.
We were playing Orsu in a cup match, and I went down to manage and coach the program. And next thing you know, I'm on the field with my boots on. I'm like, but that was his first game of rugby, and it was exciting to see him where he is now.
Wow, what a quick study.
Absolutely.
Wow.
But that's what we were talking about in the kitchen too. The athletes we are surrounded by people who just need the opportunity to perform. That's all they need.
Yeah.
Right? Coach them, to put them in an environment where people care about them. Yeah. They're going to find a job. And what's the worst case scenario? Someone's found a job, got a better life than they had yesterday. Yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about for me.
Yeah, I made a couple of friends in the process probably too.
Absolutely.
It's kind of weird. I think that's, as a social butterfly that I am, I think the social interaction, needless to say, is like just the best icing on the cake I could ever wish for. Because it doesn't matter where you go, you start talking to other people that have the same interest of rugby. Yeah. And you start, do you know so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? Yeah. And then you find somebody in common, you're like, oh, I remember, and then like the conversation starts flowing.
Well, and then as that grows, you're involved with all these other things, now you start talking about, military or veterans programs or doing barbecues for the Soldiers Recovery Unit. And there's someone in the room who's like, what?
Who?
Yeah. And then it's like, well, I don't know anything about rugby, but that sounds cool. I want to be part of that.
Yeah.
Okay, come on.
I want to say, was it during the pandemic, Kevin, that you put a group of people together and they drove by a person's house?
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was for a birthday or what cause it was for.
It was a special needs athlete. He was a young guy. He was 10 or 11 years old, and he was really struggling through COVID. And Special Olympics Washington, I reached out to them and said, "Is there any, because with COVID being and obviously, they're susceptible more. Some of them are more susceptible, so we had to keep our distance and stuff. But we got wind that he needed interaction. So we got the whole team together. We all met in a parking lot. We went down. I gave him a challenge coin, which is a big thing from our club, which is a military tradition, but we have it. And we gave him a jersey and gave him stuff. We laid it out on the lawn and stuff, and we did a drive-by wave to him and kind of a distance fist pump. And look, it was fantastic. And but once again, who benefited from that? It wasn't just one person.
No.
Everyone benefited from that. Like, what? Why would I play for this club and not that club? Well, when you start doing those kind of things, it's like that separates you pretty quickly, and hopefully what we're trying to do is hopefully every club does that so that everyone elevates to that. It's like the wheelchair rugby guys. I remember first time I met Jeremy and those guys, and I mean, I never thought I'd be engaged doing that stuff. Next thing I'm doing the scoreboard at tournaments, and he's a welder, and I asked him if he would weld this stuff, and that's our logo. And so now we have all of our trophies made for the rugby club for our awards dinner. So when a player receives something, it's meaningful. It's come from someone's hand, and then he did the Seawall for me as well, and he's available to do that for anyone else, by the way.
Yeah.
So I can connect you with it, but it supports him, supports his family. So he's actually making 10 trophies for me as we speak for our awards dinner at the end of the month. So it's cool.
Yeah, 26th.
26th, yeah.
Yeah.
So pre-season.
I just got wind of that right before you showed up, funny enough, and it was a guy that
I'm quite
doesn't
impressed.
even know that we're hanging out right now. Chris Schock.
Oh yes.
Yeah, we had a conversation about
He's
that.
now our general manager.
He's a good guy for the job.
Yes.
He's a really good guy for the job. We talked about it. He's like, Kevin Flynn called me about this position. I was like, oh, really? Interesting. I said, you should do it.
Yeah,
It'd be a good job for him.
He's passionate about it.
And he's done it. He's done it before for other clubs, really. So
And we went down with New Orleans. I remember when we were playing NOLA, and Ryan is the GM down there. He's a Marine. Once Marine, always Marine, right? So, but we get on real well, and he's like
Ryan
Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
So he's like, how do you? We're talking about it's year 2. We're talking about how we can get more people to rugby. I said, what about engage with New Orleans? Special Olympics. It's like, well, we're not sure if we've got the skill set to. I said, no, just give them tickets. Trust me. And he's like, oh, I'm not so sure. But we go down 3 weeks later. We walk out in the change room. We're high fiving all these special needs athletes going out. And that was our tunnel. And I look at him. And he's like, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I love that New Orleans vibe in general, and that stadium. I mean, it may not be the best for rugby, but it is best for the group atmosphere.
It's pretty. Look, it's hot. I'm not a big fan. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I guess the word hot.
But I will say, you walk through. What obviously for the fans, what they don't see, you go through there. They're blessed to have their own stadium. Obviously Seattle's an expensive city, right? But the reality is, you go through there. Underneath, there's their mission statements are on the wall. There's constant reminders of who they are, what they're about. So the players are constantly engaged, with why they play for New Orleans. I think they're gonna go places, with that kind of stuff, because that generates that culture. It's right.
Yeah, it's the polar opposite experience that Atlanta has experienced, or did experience, should I say?
Yeah,
because in New Orleans, you're out there, they're tailgating in the parking lot. You don't know the daughter of the owner or the brother of the owner and all that fun stuff from a random fan. Mm-hmm. And then we got I felt we got spoiled. I mean, it was just being kind is more than all it was, but
the good Southern hospitality.
Yeah, it's real there.
Yeah.
It's so real there. Yeah. They took us for the walk. We went to go walk on. We walked on the side of the pitch around to our seats, not all the way up into the stadium like every other Tom, Dick, and Harold, right? Yeah. So, but I mean, that was part of the experience for the fans to go, and we linked up with other fans, and they're like, "Oh, let's do this," and that's rugby though. If they don't know you, they're going to be nice to you, but when it's mutual fans that you have friends in common and that you're part of this tribe, if you will, and all of a sudden they're like, "Yeah, no, let's give you the Southern hospitality walk. Yeah. We're just gonna," and they got the music going, and it's just, oh my goodness, it was so good.
Well, that's the culture we're talking about. Yep. I mean, we have friends who went to New Zealand, and I'm blessed to do work with the Crusaders, so I do some stuff with their high performance guys, right? So all of a sudden, I've got mates who are going back to New Zealand, so I call up and they're going to Christchurch, so I'm like, hey, sure enough, they're out in the field with the team, and because we're connected. And then whereas you think, at that level, they'd be like, oh no, but our culture doesn't change the higher it gets. I mean, the All Blacks say better people make better All Blacks, right? I mean, at that level. So it's all about looking after the individual, and then the outcome of that is success. Not the other way around. If you go for trophies, you won't get one. If you look after people, the outcome will be trophies.
Right. That's something I'm worried about. That exact topic, Kevin. That's something I'm worried about in the U.S. rugby culture.
Well, as we just touched on earlier, it's just, because look, and unfortunately with US rugby culture, we're also governed by what other sports culture is in America, right? Which is
totally on the same thing.
Win. And we've gone down that road because it's what we understand here. I mean,
I'm familiar with it.
And I've been here 25 years. I'm an American citizen, I'm proud of it now, right? But, it's disappointing just because the rest of the world has always looked at the US and gone, oh my goodness, if they tap into the athletes that they have in the United States, we're in trouble. And here we are 4 or 5 years into the MLR, and it's like, are we doing that? Well, who's developing these players for us? And then we wonder why the national team might be struggling. Where the American players getting enough rugby? And not just in the MLR. We've got to show people that pathway. In college, we've got the collegiate draft, which is obviously needed, but there's other pathways too.
Yes.
Club
semi-pro and such like that.
Well, you've got club rugby is where where people are developed. I mean, remember you're only at college for 3 years, right? 3 or 4 years, whereas a club at home, I mean, that's my old club, London Irish, right? I mean, unfortunately, that's gone now, right? But there was 125 years of history, and it's and you could play for that club from 4 years old to you were 70 years old.
Oh wow!
Right? Because when you watch London Irish play on Saturday afternoon, there's 5 other teams in that program, and then there's the youth, then there's the 18s, there's the whole thing. It's a club, it's a program.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet in the US, but like basketball, it's fed, or football, it's fed by those collegiate sports. But what's feeding the MLR? If it's collegiate athletes, and there's absolutely a place for that. But there are guys playing for New Zealand who are 18 years old, 19 years old, playing men's rugby. So it's finding that balance and to make sure, because we want those guys to come into a professional environment and be coached by people like Clarkey and Valanesi, who are excellent coaches. But at the same time it's a struggle for them to get them game time every week. Why? Because it's a professional sport and we need to win. And people are putting a lot of money in and we want to see trophies, but what can we do to get the challenges? How can we get them more game time? And we started that. We saw guys playing for the Seawall there, not too long ago, that were coming out of the club program.
Yeah.
8 guys.
San Diego game at San Diego. Yes.
Yeah. So 8 guys, I think, from the club had played for the club that played that game.
Yeah.
But we want to see guys playing from Tacoma and Valley and Eastside and Chuckanut,
Right.
Bud Bay, and
it doesn't all have to be Seattle rugby.
No. Right.
It's just a matter of speak up, get out here.
And how can we feed those? How can we feed? Remember, we've got a squad of 40 guys.
Yeah.
So on Saturday afternoon, there's 17 guys not playing.
Yeah. Which is a huge hit.
Whereas if that was New Zealand or England or Ireland or Wales, those guys would be playing in the second team or fed out to another program. So they'd still be playing. It's hard to justify, as that individual. This is no one's fault. It's just the system. We have to try and fix it, in my opinion. But ultimately, as a player, if I'm not playing, how can I ever justify being selected?
True. Yeah. True.
Right? And then there's a danger of creating a culture. I'm not talking about Seawalls. I'm just talking about rugby in general.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Because this is not just a Seawalls problem. This is
absolutely not.
American pro rugby.
Yeah, I don't want people to think that's what. Then all of a sudden you've created a culture where this player, so it's me, I want someone to get hurt.
Right.
Which is not the culture.
That's not the culture you want.
It's that dog-eat-dog mentality.
Well, because I'm not going to get a chance. Exactly. And every week I don't play, so they're the challenges that we're trying to overcome, because insurance is a big part of it in the United States,
absolutely. Right? Everybody's got to be SIP.
And SIP is one thing, but it's like, back home, even if I was a professional rugby player and I got hurt, I can still just go to the doctor and I can go to the hospital and then someone's going to take care of me.
It's right there.
Right.
Nope.
So what's your insurance? So now remember, if this was a business, that's
a huge added expense that you don't have in other countries.
It's indirect. It's direct but indirect, but it's it's part of that. Right?
Take rugby out of the equation. And it's understandable. Take rugby out of the equation. I run a plumbing company, right? Raymark, there's your plug, right? And Raymark Plumbing. I run that. Now, I can't. If a guy goes and works for Southwest or another plumbing company tomorrow and he gets hurt, my insurance can't cover him.
Right.
And that's the same with rugby. It's no different. So how do we get over that challenge of, if he goes to work for another company, that company just happens to be a rugby company.
So with the MLR, is the insurance from the MLR for the player? So if the player moves around, they're still insured?
Yes, but they have to be contracted with that team, right? I mean, but they can't play. But they can't play for a non-MLR team.
Right,
And she
right.
said there's-
But my thought process is just for conversation, not really making a point, but like it is, say, a character is playing for Seattle, and then all of a sudden he's playing for Utah.
No, because the
And the
MLR,
insurance
the
still covered,
MLR,
right?
yes.
So it's a league wide.
It's a league-wide.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. That's why I want to bring it up
Yeah.
as a subject, because it's like, I forget how much
For sure.
we know that nobody else does,
Don't
and it's
think
just common
No,
sense.
no.
to us.
If they're in there, where the challenge lies is, remember, those 17 guys who might not get as much rugby, like in another country, we can play them over here and they're going to be fine. If they get hurt, they're going to be looked after. Whereas here, it's like, okay, well, who's covering that cost?
Right.
It's
all liability.
Right, so there are programs, MLR programs here that are getting supplemental insurance, or there's ways around, but it's not. You have to think about it.
You got the gears turning in my head, because I'm like, okay, how do they do in the academy?
But that adds
the
up.
academies in other places.
And that adds up in expenses too.
Yeah, yes, it's more cost for owners,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's not an infinite amount of money yet. These guys are really fair play to all the owners and ours,
not like
especially they're putting a hand in the pocket constantly.
That was an eye opener today when we went to a practice for Seattle, right? The Seahawks.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that they had so many people there just for practice.
Yeah.
And I mean,
it's fascinating.
if that was a Seawolves game, we'd all be like, Joe,
Oh my God.
There was so many options. There were so many bathrooms. There were so many bougie, if you will, right? I mean, but we're going to be there eventually.
Where does that come from? It's dangerous to go all the way there, because the thing is, those people who are watching don't play anything.
Right.
We watch it, right? We're in a culture here where if I'm good enough at high school, I go to college. If I'm good there, then I go to. So the athletes dwindle down, so there's hardly anything left.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in the UK or Ireland or South Africa, everyone plays.
Yeah.
Just a small amount of professional.
It's just different.
Whereas here, we're
levels.
working our way towards professional, and everyone's watching.
Right.
Right. Now, if everyone's just watching, who's feeding this thing?
Right.
Whereas collegiate football feeds that. We're way off that. We're 100 years old. So
I don't even think it'll be in our lifetime. And I don't mean to be negative, but it's a reality.
But once again, as I mentioned to you in the kitchen, but we're surrounded by athletes that aren't doing anything, right? Like if we're saying all of our best players come from college sports, right? Well, what about boxers? How many boxers went to university?
No.
Right.
You don't play with a collegiate.
No.
MMA,
Boxing.
same thing.
You look at some of the best athletes in the world that are either in track or in playing. Maori boys playing for the All Blacks that have come from bad backgrounds or something. Guess what? They didn't go to college. It's not just that. That's a part of it. But how do we tap into the rest of it and provide opportunity for those athletes that all of a sudden it's over? Well, no, it doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
It can. And guess what? We can find you a job. A good example of that is the Raptors in Denver.
Yeah.
Right.
I was wondering if that's the rabbit hole you're going to go down, right? But
I get on well with the guys there. Mark Bullock, who's the director of rugby, is from here. He started Liberty. He's the guy who actually created the logo for Liberty Rugby.
Oh, really?
Yep. So
Rex Norris had always spoken highly of him.
Yeah, Mark's a good guy. I mean, and look, their challenge is they're taking athletes from other sports where the culture is totally different, right? It's cutthroat, and they're trying to put them in an environment and create a rugby. But I'd go out there and I'd try and help them and put processes in place to try and. You've got guys from lots of different backgrounds, and a lot of them are very rough backgrounds, right? And it's a case of one kid I spoke to, he's 23, and I said to him, "What would happen if you weren't here?" He goes, "I have to be here." He goes, "I was at home at the weekend in Chicago. If I'm not here, I'm shooting somewhere or someone's shooting at me." That's his reality. Now rugby is taking that away from him, right? Yep. Now life's okay. We've got gang members in our club program. There are other gang, we've had gang members before. Seawalls have had gang members, ex-gang members that are now mentors within their community, right? Because rugby's provided them the opportunity not to play the sport, right? Because what if they got hurt tomorrow? Do we go, right, we don't need him anymore? No, that's not our culture, right? The first thing is, for you to come and play for us, and I'm in conversations like this right now with multiple players, the first thing we talk about is, how are we going to get you a job? How do we get you a place to live? And this isn't professional. I'm not talking about the Seawalls. I'm talking about amateur rugby. So if we can't look after you, I wouldn't invite you. That's the primary, because you might come here tomorrow, get hurt, and what do? Say, well, you can leave now. No, you,
Right, yeah.
No, we got to find
Doesn't
something for
even-
you to do while you're healing.
That's unfathomable,
Right.
right?
But the thing is,
should be. Right.
but the fact that it's unfathomable is unfortunately for us too. Because we're rugby people, we take it for granted, so we never tell it.
Right.
We
Yes.
never tell that story.
This is part of the culture,
It's
right?
part
This is
It's our normal.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And you start talking to people who need work, need a place to live, need an opportunity, need to get out of a bad situation. You know, and rugby, the worst thing that will happen to you will be that you'll have a job and a place to live. That's fundamental to some people. You know, and we've taken it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's how we go into schools and how we communicate that. We shouldn't be, you know, I was just as bad. I'd be going into schools saying, "Oh, rugby's a really cool sport," you know, and this is how you pass the ball backwards. We get to hit hard. You get to carry the ball. And teachers are like, whatever, you know. But now you can go into school and say, we've got a community program that will help your kids be better kids. You put them in a safe space, be in a diverse community, give them opportunity no matter what shape, color, size they are.
Yeah.
You know, help them find work when they get out. Help them find opportunities through college. And they're like, what's this community program called? It happens to be called rugby.
Yes. Yes.
Right? You know, and then you put the right people in the room. You know, we've got guys in our programs, like I just mentioned. Now, guess what? They're going to these high schools and telling their story to people in the room who are gang members. And people are getting up. The last one I went to, it was so cool. I ran out of cards to hand people, you know, and it was all Polynesian kids because it was through the Pacific Island community at the school. 460 kids there, the graduation rate 60%. And we put people in the room to show them that there's hope, that they were like them, right?
This is possible.
And then one of the kids walked past me, and on his arm was that big was written my phone number, right? So then you know we're making a connection. But it can't be me telling the story, right? It's they need to see someone who's been through what they've been through.
So they can relate and
They
have
can
that
relate
bond.
to it. Yeah.
It definitely, like, it's the, I guess I never thought about it until it puked out of your mouth just now, because, like, yeah, we talk about the collision and fall in love with the collision, and then you'll learn the rules and such, but the reality is the flow of the game is that bond, that support, that, you know, when my buddy goes down, it needs to be more than one buddy that's over him. It has to be a couple. It has to be a couple teammates, because otherwise you turn over the ball and the phase is over, and it's just right in the foot,
it's not dissimilar from
That's
military.
life.
From military, right? You know, I mean, I'm director rugby for the Army Rugby Union, right? So I deal with a lot of these guys, and we actually work with veterans as well, right? That was the stipulation to get back involved with them, was they would allow veterans to play. You know, and the values with rugby and military are very similar. You know, if you see a guy go down the floor, why do I want it? What's my why? You know, now the people above that, which for us is the administration of the rugby program, president of the rugby club, and coaches, we've got to create an environment where you care about the people next to you.
Yes, you're playing for your teammate.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen overnight.
No, because that builds trust.
And a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, right? It's like, well, let's go and help a special needs event or a wheelchair rugby event or something like that. And all of a sudden, you know, people go and help, and now they're conversing in a different way than they were in a rugby field. They're engaging each other differently. You know, like the Crusaders came, and it was interesting. The first time they come over 3 years ago, they said one of their biggest, they would put guys in teams of 5, right, within the program.
Right.
And they would give them, it was competitive, right, whatever they were going to do. They'd compete against these other teams. Well, they took on knitting.
I was going to say, even a scavenger hunt would be fun to witness, by the way.
Well, they did knitting, right? So now you've got, like, I think Margaret was there at the time, but they're knitting. And they said it was crazy because everyone, it was a leveler, right? No one's ever done it. You know, everyone's in the same boat. But he said after 3 months, everyone's like, we've got to get this sweater done. But all of a sudden, they're communicating about something that's not rugby, right? Yeah. And troubleshooting about things that have got nothing to do with how we're going to score a try.
Right.
You know, and
but yet it's building their communication and their connection. Yes.
Yeah. And then they start to appreciate each other for who they are as a person, not just a rugby player. Right? And then it's like, well, now they go on the floor. It's not just my teammate, it's my mate.
Yeah.
It's brotherhood.
It's brotherhood.
You know, you keep on bringing up military, and I remember hanging out with a guy, and Tim Metcher, and he said,
Yeah,
he's great. I always saw him as a sergeant of arms of that team when he was there because he was. I mean, like, you get to tell.
he was a great leader for the team. Yeah.
He really, yeah. And anyways, he is the one that said, it is the closest game to going to war without actually killing another person, because you have to rely your entire success on your teammates.
Yeah. And interestingly, with rugby, as well, there's every shape and size on the field all at the same time.
Yes.
I mean, look to year one. Our captain was Phil Mack, who was the smallest guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So
yes.
all of a sudden, and what does that tell you about the culture of rugby? Respect. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. There's no "I'm bigger than you." There's no "it's puffing chests out." No. It's about what you brought to the table. Right. It doesn't matter what shape or size you are.
Respect is good.
And we want
Phil
to.
Mack, boy, talking about a pit bull.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story which you'll enjoy, and I know fans enjoy this. And this is on me, right? We went to the final. We're playing in San Diego, and this is year one, right? So I'm
against Glendale.
Remember that time Phil Mack took no outside coach, as it were.
Right,
we're all internal. It was me and Phil and Matt Turner,
and he was the head coach and the scrummy, right?
There
was no one else to blame, right?
So, he's the one. Yeah.
And it was just us, But ultimately, we're on the way to the field. I get to the field, and there's no balls at the field, and I'm like, oh this is before the final, right? And I'm like, I call up, and we're playing against Denver, and remember, my mate's the manager. And he goes, I must have left him at the hotel. So, I'm like,
Yeah.
But anyway, but it was on me not to. I should have checked. But anyway, this is as true as I stand in now. The guy's got a spare boot. I had to go back to the hotel. They warmed up with a rugby boot. That's how pre-cup final. The warm up was all with a rugby boot, and then we ended up winning it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but the cool thing
in reality, though, the thing about how harder it is to catch the boot than it is a ball. I mean, that was brilliant.
That's resourcefulness.
When you talk about culture, when you talk to those guys back now, is it cool about if we won? Yes, it's cool. But guess what? Do you know what brings sport up more? That we did the warm up with a rugby boot.
That's legend.
Right.
That's a legend. That's lore. That's
seriously,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, real history happened.
Exactly.
Hey, and I can laugh about it because we won. Right?
Right. You do.
Yeah.
I'd be sitting there going, "We lost the cup final because I forgot the balls."
And then every Facebook group would be
right. He should be the manager.
Why not?
So what else? Do you want to chat about anything else? I mean, right now about the team. I mean, this year it was great. I really enjoyed being back. Last year we got back. Jenny, my wife, is basically the team manager.
I'm kind of sad Jenny's not here. I'm not going to lie.
Someone's going to ask
Jenny
kids, right?
to come, right? Yeah. Tell Jenny, hey, next time Matt says it's with you without the kids.
Absolutely.
Please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that would be fun. Because obviously you're both very genuine people, but she brings a different vibe to it. Yeah. And to watch her with the team, she's a breath of fresh air, man. Unreal. And she's on top of her stuff. She's very professional, but she comes from she played water polo for the national team. She's a Hall of Famer at UW for rowing. So she's from a sporting environment. She's been with me 20 years. So you better she knows how to herd cats. Is what I just heard.
Yeah, exactly.
Or should I say squirrels?
Right. But funny enough, we would order food this year. I'll tell you, like a little back end story which people might enjoy is that we'd order all the food and a load of bananas. Well, after the first week of bananas, there was a load of bananas left over. So Jenny she'd take them home and they're rotting, so make banana bread, right? And she makes amazing banana bread. So anyway, next thing you know, we're 3 weeks in, and I'm like, just a load of bananas being. But then the guys are having a thing amongst, don't eat the bananas, we'll have banana bread on Monday. Right? So it became the thing. But once again, what did that do? The guys were conversing with each other about something other than rugby, and it was about, is the banana bread? Bring the banana bread with you.
Right? Tradition.
Now we've ruined it, right?
Tradition on an accident.
Yeah. And I called all the guys in one, and I said I was pissed, and they'll come in, and I don't get angry, and they're like looking at me, and I'm like, I said, I can't believe everyone thinks Jenny's making this banana bread, but I'm slaving over the stove at home. you know, like yeah, whatever. You know. So, but no, it's
Did
been
you
a
show
good
them a picture of your apron too?
Yeah,
She-
exactly.
she gave
Show
you
them, yeah.
reviews. Yes. Yeah.
But no, we had a good dynamic. We had the management team was 4. I brought 2 more guys in. Dave, who's the manager of the club, and Brian, who's ex-army, and Brian, who's the head of health, director of our medical stuff for the club, came on board as well. So they got 4 people. And through COVID, we never saw it be more beneficial because I got COVID and ball never got dropped. Someone else was there.
Yep.
So when guys showed up, it still looked the same. You know,
Same
so,
routine.
yeah. And I feel like the coaching staff, management, and everyone else, I think this year, it's, you know, last year was Clarky's kind of first year as head coach. And we're getting closer and closer and trying to figure out what everyone's roles and responsibilities are and stuff like that. You know, so I'm excited for the future. So
That's good to hear. That's
Yeah.
good because for those at home that don't know, he hasn't always been like that with this club. So
No,
it's
no,
good
no,
to
I
hear
mean-
positive.
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, after we won year 2, you know, it wasn't really going the direction I thought it needed to go.
No.
So I, you know, there was people that I played rugby with and friends of mine, and I didn't really feel like this was going in the right direction as far as how we were looking after people and stuff. And rather than argue, I just thought I need to take myself out of the equation and focus on something else. And that was, well, focus on the club and our community programs and really build that back out again and make sure people are doing things for the right reasons, you know. And Clarky approached me, you know, 2 years later, which was the beginning of last year, and asked me if I wanted to get back involved. And, you know, I mean, I was there at the beginning. Of course I do.
Of course you do. You just
Right.
like give me a reason to,
Yeah.
and I'm in.
But we've got, you know, it's like anything. If I go to work for any company, I'm going to go, what do you stand for? Who are you? What are you trying to achieve? How are we achieving that? You know, and it's no different with the rugby team.
Right.
You know, and people think, well, you know, people are passionate about rugby. They'll just play rugby for us. No, they'll play rugby, but it doesn't have to be for you.
It's about us.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we create, you know, when I played
Yeah,
at London,
you're right.
well, and I tell you what, a massive epiphany for me was how to create culture within a rugby program. And I'm like, why was it always so easy for me? Well, because I played for London Irish, and that's who I was. My family's Irish, and I
set
grew
the
up in
example.
England. Right? Well, no, but I mean, it's who you are. You are London Irish, right? It's culturally,
Okay.
it's who I am. It wasn't like Harlequins or Wasps or Richmond. It's just a place or a team that's called a name. This was actually physically, you know, my blood. I am London Irish, right? So I'm like, wow, you know, I never took it. I've taken it for granted that that's. So now I realise how hard it is to create a culture for a program that actually isn't, you know, a cultural team.
When
Like
did you
London
have that
Scottish.
epiphany?
About 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the Seawalls, I was like,
Yeah.
it was after year 2, funny enough, because we created it within Seattle Rugby Club. There were 17 players playing in year 1 from the club and 17 in year 2. And we'd won national championships, and a lot of the guys, the other guys, were the guys we play against in Canada on our team.
Yeah,
So we all knew each other.
Yeah.
And once again, it was like, oh wow, we've taken culture for granted because we built this, you know, here, and all of a sudden, it's like, how do we create a culture for a program that's got so many different types of people in it, right? That aren't. When I was at London Irish, you had to be of Irish descent.
Mhm.
So guess what? We were all connected in England, which
Yeah.
made you even
Oh,
more
it's
like,
always big. Oh, yeah.
you had the bit between your teeth
Oh, yeah,
every
yeah.
week. So imagine when we played the British Army, it was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was a lot,
it's intense.
right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was
Intense games,
Yeah,
you know?
that was a prideful game.
Oh yeah. So then it's like, well, how do we create that? And then I had to go question myself. I'm like, well, why? I've always been passionate about the teams I played for. Well, of course I am. It's who I am.
Yeah.
You know.
That's what when we were talking in the kitchen. That's one thing I really noticed, and this is something maybe Peter Player, you are on the same wavelength with this, but taking trips to Ireland and England was, it's like a cathedral, like these grounds that you visit, these teams that you see. It's more than just a club.
Yeah,
it's more
absolutely.
than just
Well,
you know,
and
RDS
interest.
Arena or whatever. it is.
Oh yeah.
It's-
Well, and interestingly, so if you play amateur rugby at home, you're not going to leave your amateur team to go and play for that amateur team that's the next town over, right? That's unheard of. The aspiration for you is to become a professional. So you go up, not sideways, right?
Mhm.
The only time you'd go sideways is if you moved to a whole different region of the country, right? Whereas we're a little bit more nomadic here. You know, guys are like, well, that's a better team, I'll go over there.
Right.
right? So, that's not what we're trying to achieve. You know, we want guys to stay at Tacoma Rugby Club. We want guys, and then it's like, how can we make Tacoma Rugby Club achieve the things they need to achieve, and Valley and East? Because right now, Seattle Rugby Club goes to Canada to play our games because it's a better standard at the moment, right?
Yep.
Do I want to? No.
No.
I don't mind playing some exhibition games up there, but when you're playing 25 games crossing the border with a bunch of guys who don't have any money, that becomes really expensive, really time-consuming. Guys don't want to do it all the time. And our women's program, right? You know, you've got a lot of young female athletes that don't have a lot of money, and we're saying, let's go to Canada and play rugby.
Well, you can't random willy-nilly take anybody up there either anymore now either.
No.
You're going to have passport.
No, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's money. It's
again.
all money. So now it's like, well, how can we look at each other around here and help each other, create a culture within our community to be better? Like Rugby Washington is so much in a better place than it was 2-3 years ago, as you know.
Yeah, Aaron Lee's going to come on soon too. It's funny. I reached out to him. Weird how I reached out to the same guys, but no. It's he's the right guy for the job too.
Oh, because he's a guy who's come up from the youth program, played for Liberty, played for Valley, played for the Seattle Rugby Club. You know, I played with Aaron. And it was the bigger picture. It's about rugby. It's not about. So when we go into schools, you know, year 1 and 2, you know, I would wear certain things, or club and Seawalls, and I would be questioned by. I saw Lommy was on a couple of weeks ago. It's great. I remember him asking me about, you know, why aren't you like mentioning the Seawalls more or something? I'm like, it's about rugby. It's not. It's about the culture of rugby. And look, we can talk about the Seawalls. I talk about the Seahawks, and most kids in the room will go, fantastic. I'm never going to be a Seahawk.
Right.
Whereas I can put people in the room and go, just a minute, I can be that.
That's achievable.
I can play for Valley Rugby Club, and they'll help me find a job and a place to live. Oh.
Yeah, that's another club that's really stepped up their game. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
Really happily surprised. Totally knew they could do it, but they needed a couple different leaders to do it.
Yeah, it's like any program, right? You know, you're blessed to have leaders, and you know, my challenge for Seattle Rugby Club is, you know, I'm obviously very passionate about what we're doing, and the club is just a vessel. It's not really, you know, I mean, I love Seattle Rugby Club, but it's more about rugby. I'm more passionate about rugby than I am the club, you know. So it's really a case of, you know, and I meet with the presidents of Valley and stuff, and talk to them and other people in the community, and to go, you know, how are you doing things, you know, and things I've learned, and I don't know it all. I'm learning every day, but it's like, you know, when you ask a president of a rugby club, I'll always start with, and I won't mention names, but I'll always mention, when was the last business? Because remember, if you're a president of a rugby club, a lot of those guys own their own business or a manager within their businesses, right? I'm like, when was the last big important meeting you had with your company? And they'll go, oh, you know, here, and we went to dinner, or we did it at you know, this restaurant, or we did it at the office, and okay, great. So when was the last big meeting you had about your rugby club? And before you answer, I'm guessing it was in a bar. And they're like, yeah. So you want both of them to be successful, but you're going to do one of them in a bar, and you're going to do one of them in an office. Maybe, right? And all of a sudden, you've changed the dynamic of the people that are in your leadership group. You put it in, you know, in an office, and you have a whiteboard, and there's things up there, and there's a plan, and there's no outside distractions. All of a sudden, you change people's behaviour. They're like, oh, we're being serious today. Well, that's why we're here. You know, there's a time that you can go to the bar afterwards or do whatever afterwards.
Yeah.
But we're having our important meetings, as I did, in pubs, right? And then expecting it to be successful. Yet when we want our businesses to be successful, we don't do it in a pub.
No. So not successful business.
Yeah. I mean, look, the reality is, I think, it's rugby people, I think, are amazing people, but at the same time, we want everyone outside rugby to take rugby seriously. The people who take rugby seriously the least sometimes are rugby people, right? Because we're like, yeah, no worries, bro, blah, blah, and I've got you. Or now we go and try and go after sponsors outside of rugby. They're not buying into that. We have to approach them in a different way, you know, and get them engaged. You know, how many people do you reach? They're going to ask you all the questions. You know, how many people do you reach? Blah, blah. You've got to document those things, and it's tough because a lot of rugby clubs are. Someone goes, who's president? And there'll be some guy in the back or a woman in the back goes, oh, I'll do it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. But if we help each other, now it's not such
It's not intimidating.
burden.
Yeah.
There's a new club, the Rhinos, just started up in Everett. You know, the first thing they did, reach out, Flynn. I said, no problem, whatever you need. So I shared all of our documents, anything we got, our bylaws, everything. Things that I remember back in the day, I'd be like,
Overwhelmed.
this is not my skill set, and I'm a rugby player at the time,
Yeah.
you know. But now, our board of directors now is 60% of them are not even people who've ever been affiliated with rugby, and they're professionals. Why? Because they want to be involved with the community program, right? And they want to help with the bigger picture. We do a lot of work with the oncology unit, the VA, and unfortunately, guys with terminal, and we've helped guys and their families for a few years now. People have come in and got on our board because of that. Like, we want to be part of this, you know. Rugby is just a part of it.
It's a sliver.
Yeah. If playing 80 minutes was what it's all about, then what happens when you get injured? You're not a rugby player anymore.
Right.
I don't exist anymore because I'm not playing. That doesn't make sense.
Seen as a human being.
Right. And that goes against everything we tell everyone while we're playing.
Right.
Right.
But it's like, is it kind of like that's kind of like the American culture, isn't it? Though? Right?
Well,
like,
it's a struggle here because when guys, you know, and I'm probably going to upset some people, but it's
good.
But you know what? You know, they'll agree. You know, when someone goes, I'm getting married, like, have a nice life. You know, it's like goodbye here. You know, because maybe their spouse isn't brought into the rugby culture and all that stuff. And
That's a good point.
And they don't. They leave it. They leave. And I have these conversations, I would say, every month with players who are like, because I have a wife that's supportive and blah, 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 you know. But the same to people like, well, how do you do that? I said, I guess that your wife sees you leave the house, go training, you know, you go to games, you get back late, you might go for a few beers, blah, blah. It's separate. I don't see any of it separate. Imagine the support group your wife has if you incorporate her into this culture, right? If something happens to you, she's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't. We see it separate, right? And I don't see it separate. I see everything connected. Work, how we connect with people outside of rugby, in rugby. It's no different from, I don't see it as any different. Our kids can grow up. They don't have to play. They can be part of an environment where they see, my kids have seen every shape, size, colour of person interact in a positive manner. And it has sculpted who they are. Not me telling them. They've felt it, they've seen it, they've experienced it, and now they know everyone deserves respect, right? And that's what we've got to, unfortunately, you know, when someone marries someone who's not there and incorporated in that, it's like, I have to give up playing now, which basically means you're never going to see me again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Which could be scary because that might be some of the most consistent, positive environment they've ever been around.
Well,
and what happens in the marriage? Like, what happens?
Right.
Makes you worry.
Well, we've experienced loss, you know, with people who've taken their own lives recently, you know, and it's, you know,
we lost quite a few this summer.
Absolutely, and some of that, and some of those people did pull away from that rugby environment, you know, and these are support groups. Look, rugby in America is boys and girls club for everyone over 18.
Pretty much.
Right?
Pretty
Because
much.
who's
That's
looking
a
after?
really good analogy.
Let's think about a kid that's 18 years old in a bad situation who doesn't make the basketball team to go to college. Who's looking after him next? No one.
No one.
No one.
18 to 25 probably. Right. It's probably the toughest part as a man in America. Yeah. If you, I mean, period. Well, like, you don't know, am I going to go to college? What work track am I going on? What's going to keep me stimulated on the right side?
And you're only having those thought processes if you're in a positive place already.
Yes, right? Yes. But if you're around the
if you're in a bad environment,
I don't want to say. We're on the same.
If you're in an abusive or a bad environment, you're like, you can't even see the wood through the trees.
Right. This is day to day.
And when you're under 18, there are teachers. There are people, there are community programs.
You're being told what to do on a regular basis.
Yeah, there's someone looking out for you. At 18, it's like, next. Well, who's looking after that lad?
Yeah.
Or that woman who's in an abusive relationship. So, you know, so all of a sudden, it's like, rather than argue with the system, let's just provide a place for them to come. Right? And then now we share that message where there's a place for them to come. And guess what? You get, like I say, boxing's a great example. They need opportunity. They're trying to get out of something, right? You know, I don't think a lot of those guys woke up and say, I want to be punched in the face. If they had the opportunity to do something else, but they didn't have an opportunity. We've had guys who've come to me, one in particular, who said to me, I want to join the army. And I said, why do you want to join the army? He goes, because my other option is join again. Mm-hmm. So I connected him with someone who was a Samoan Special Forces guy. You know, a year later, he came back to me. And I said, just play rugby, get with this guy. You know, he thought that he couldn't see job. He couldn't see All he saw was army, gang, right? And I said both those things involve people shooting at him.
Yeah, right.
So, but ultimately, a year later, he came back and said, "I want to join the army." I said, "Why do you want to join the army?" He goes, "I want to serve my country." Great answer.
Yeah, that's a totally different situation.
Right. So all you're doing is you're trying to give them the opportunity to take the blinkers off and go. And the way to do that is put the right people in the room, and they're like, "Oh, so there's hope." Yes.
Yeah, give them some mentorship.
Yeah. And I realised that I couldn't be that guy. I was doing it for years at Rainier Beach, but none of the kids looked like me. Right. And then I put someone who did Dion, who's a Seawall from the Seattle Rugby Club guy. He stood in front of them, and one of our female players, and that was the most empowering thing. We had a female player, and she was a body type that they thought, well, she can't play sports because they thought they might have to be 5'10" or 5'9" and play basketball. Or and all of a sudden, you put someone in front of them. No, I play for the women's national team. So I can play rugby. And it just changed people right there, you know. And Dion spoke to the kids, and the engagement was. I haven't spoken since. I just put the right people in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's their message, and they have to see the hope. And all of a sudden, what's the outcome of that? Dion became a Seawolf, won 2 national championships with the Seawolves. Why is that? Because you looked after him. Right? That's the outcome. Right?
Yeah,
and
right.
it's all connected. You know, I don't see anything not being connected. You know, and we put things in compartments and stuff like that. But that's our community program. No, that's part of your success. Right? That's absolutely part of your success. You know, so, and like I say, there's lots of opportunities to get out and do stuff like that. You know?
Well, we're going to keep talking, but I'm going to cut you guys off from our conversation.
I'll chat forever.
No. You and I are 2 peas in a pod, bro. But I know that some of these people are going to lose interest.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kevin.